Hello, my name is Nina. Welcome to my channel Inside the Mind of a Human Predator. In this first video, I would like to highlight the top 5 red flags that you may encounter in your romantic relationship with a possible human predator before you got hooked. Now, I am not a clinician, therefore I stay away from terminology like personality disorder. I prefer to use terminology like narcissistic or psychopathic relational style, or even better, to simply refer to parasitic, aggressive, destructive, dysfunctional personalities with a long-term, pervasive, maladaptive pattern of behavior. So, without further ado, I'd like to get going with the list, and the number 1 red flag that is mentioned across the board and with which I agree is a love bombing. Now, love bombing is described in a fairly contrived pop cultural way of the way we perceive romance. Instant soulmate status, things moving way too quickly, professions of undying love, and a happily ever after, gifts, flowers, trips, vacations, introductions to family and friends way too quickly, possibly even moving in together. Now, is this an incorrect list? No, it's actually quite accurate. However, I take 2 issues with the list. Number 1 is that at times it might be difficult to differentiate between love bombing and simple, natural state of limerence, passion at the beginning of a romantic relationship. In which case, of course, you'd have to look for other signs in a systemic way and actions as opposed to simple incidents. But the second reason that I have a problem with this list is the fact that I never see the personality of the target mentioned, and that is very important. Not everyone would fall for that contrived version of a love bombing. For instance, you may not be into chocolates, flowers, and restaurants. So what does a human predator in question do? The human predator, of course, would mold his particular strategy to the target in question. For instance, he or she may try to match your very specific intellectual, eclectic, unique set of interests. Oh my gosh, you too like 1920s Russian black and white film from the silent era? This is remarkable. We must be soulmates. Now, does this mean that every person who happens to share your interest, who walks into your life, not just in romantic scenarios, but in terms of simple friendships, have some kind of poor intentions directed towards you? Of course not. In fact, that is a very important disclaimer that should be made. Whenever we make new friends even, we try to find some kind of common ground. We try to find shared interests that we engage in, or even express the desire to learn more about the other person by engaging in something new for us. So how do we know whether we are being love bombed or whether this is a more natural, benign situation? We'll look at the other red flags. So let's look at red flag number 2. Red flag number 2 is a disproportionate negative reaction to your healthy attempts to set boundaries. For instance, by saying no. You may say no in a very trivial way. I'm sorry, I can't meet you on Saturday. I have to go see my sick grandma, but I can see you on Sunday. I'm sorry, I couldn't respond to your text message at work. I was very busy. Now, a normal person would understand that these are all totally logical explanations and would probably act in the same way with someone else. A human predator would have a disproportionate negative reactions that will come out in a number of ways. The most obvious way is raging. This is essentially an adult temper tantrum. We could also call it having a short fuse, and it would be very disproportionate to what the no or the challenge was set to. At the end of the rage, the potential human predator in question may actually demonstrate a remarkable sense of what seems to be introspection. I'm so sorry. I know I have a short fuse. I really need to work on my emotional reactions. I will never do this again. And this may come across to you as actually a very emotionally mature individual when the reality is quite the opposite. Now, a more difficult way to discern that you're actually getting a disproportionate negative reaction is what some people refer to as passive aggression or covert aggression. This may be sulking, this may be deliberately ignoring you, canceling plans just for the sake of punishing you for saying no. So, you may not even realize that this is going on until you look at, once again, long-term patterns of behavior and the other red flags. So, with that in mind, let's move on to red flag number 3. Red flag number 3 is a disproportionate, exaggerated, constant criticism of others. When you meet a new person and you get to know them, whether in a romantic relationship or in a friendship, you will be listening to their life story in normal, natural conversations. And you may not know right off the bat whether what they're saying is actually expressing a legitimate, inappropriate behavior on the part of other people towards them, or simply gossip, or whether there's something more sinister going on. So once again, you will have to watch for patterns. And perhaps this new, amazing boyfriend of yours is going to be critical of every woman in his life. The ex-girlfriend that didn't follow the type of career path that for some reason he thought was very important for her. The mother, the sister, even the former boss, the female former boss that terminated his employment. Now, individually, these actually may be legitimate criticisms, but when you start looking at them systemically, this might be problematic. And if this is indeed a sign of competitiveness and what a psychologist would probably call infantile envy, you too at some point may end up on that same list. Now let's move on to red flag number 4. Red flag number 4 is actually linked to red flag number 2, boundaries and saying no. And this is subtle indications of power and control. Again, you might not be able to discern that this is what's going on from the onset. The way this may be expressed is your new boyfriend or girlfriend really likes to make decisions for you in benign social situations. What films you watch together, what you eat at a restaurant, where you go. But the way this may come up would have a plausible explanation. This is a new restaurant for you. I've been here many times. Let me recommend what you should have. So once again, you should be watching out for the other signs and for actions over a long time period. So let's move on to the final red flag on this particular list. Red flag number 5. I would simply call it lying. This may come out in different ways: embellishment, inconsistencies, or outright lying. Now, this, once again, is not something that is going to come out right off the bat. This is something that you would probably start picking up in conversations that are happening naturally. Certain inconsistencies about your new boyfriend or girlfriend's work history, places where he or she had lived, relationships with other people. For instance, your new love interest may start talking about his or her work history, and it would turn out that there's really not much, but he or she will have absolutely grandiose and massive plans for the future. And this makes this red flag linked to number 1, love bombing, future faking. So for instance, he or she will talk about these amazing plans of investing in real estate, and he or she will paint this lovely rosy picture of your future together and where you will do this and how this would all work, and most important, how much money you will make off of it and how this would make your life of travel and fun absolutely amazing, even though in reality, all of this exists in his or her mind only. So this is something to watch out for in combination with the other 4 red flags. Now, I can keep going with red flag number 6, 7, 8, etc. For instance, something to watch out for is whether or not your new love interest has moved around a lot, with or without a plausible explanation. Because human predators like to sever ties and move on in communities where they essentially have destroyed their reputations through their own actions. But for the sake of brevity, I'll leave this list at 5 red flags, and I hope to hear your comments down below, and I hope to see you back at this channel. Thank you.